You know, we're used to thinking that abuse and control look like yelling, humiliation, or violence. But what if I told you that the most dangerous, most reliable mechanism of control looks like the greatest love story ever told, the kind where you are adored, carried on a pedestal, and shielded from every problem in the world? Vienna, 1854. Europe is obsessed with a beautiful fairy tale. A wild, free-spirited 16-year-old girl named Elizabeth of Bavaria marries the Emperor of Austria. He's madly in love with her. It's the ultimate dream, a real-life Disney movie. But exactly 1 month after the wedding of the century, this girl cries every single day. Her mother-in-law takes away the key to her own bedroom. She dictates what the young empress eats and who she speaks to. And when Elizabeth gives birth to her first daughter, her mother-in-law simply walks in, takes the baby, and moves her to her own quarters. Elizabeth isn't allowed to feed or bathe her. She's only allowed to visit her own child on a schedule. And do you know what her husband, the man who loves her so madly, does? He says, "Mother knows best." That little girl will die at age 2 during a trip the mother-in-law organized. Elizabeth wasn't even allowed to be there. And here is the ultimate paradox. Nobody at the time called this abuse. They called it tradition, order, care, love. Today, I want to show you how romance became the perfect cover for power, how beautiful words about love hide absolute loss of rights, and why millions of people today, without even realizing it, willingly walk into the exact same cage, simply because the bars are covered in rose petals. Sisi's story became one of the most romanticized in Europe. Musicals, postcards, chocolates, the tragic beauty, the eternal love. But if you strip away the romantic filter, you see something else. A 16-year-old girl was placed into an institution of absolute hierarchy, stripped of her children and her right to choose, and they called it a marriage. And Sisi wasn't an anomaly. She was the display window, because the 19th century turned romantic love into the core ideology of marriage. At the exact same moment when marriage was a tool of maximum control. Think about what was happening at the same time. In England, the legal doctrine of coverture meant a wife legally did not exist separate from her husband. In France, the Napoleonic Code explicitly stated that a wife owes obedience to her husband. And everywhere, this was framed not as subjugation, but as harmony. He leads, she follows. He is the oak, she is the ivy. This wasn't a coincidence. The romantic ideal didn't just exist alongside this lack of rights. It was its interface. A beautiful, intuitive interface, hiding a ruthless machine that distributed property, custody, and power. The more beautiful the story a culture tells about love, the fewer questions people ask about who actually holds the power. So, how exactly does romance hide power? And why does it still work today? It's a system made of 4 layers. Let's see if you recognize any of this from your own life. Layer 1. The substitution of vocabulary. Control, in its pure form, sounds repulsive, but dress up the words, and everything changes. He makes decisions for her, becomes. He takes responsibility. She is financially dependent, becomes. He provides for the family. He isolates her from friends, becomes. He protects her. Sound familiar? Don't worry your pretty little head about it. Let me handle everything. Every element of control gets a romantic synonym. For centuries, culture has packed the word care with both tenderness and submission, until the border between them completely vanished. Layer 2, isolating the couple from the system. The romantic narrative is always sold as a story of two people, just him and her, in a vacuum. But behind every couple there is an architecture. Whose name is on the house, or whose name is on the car? Whose labor at home goes unpaid? The romantic myth says everything between you is just about love. And if you're unhappy, it just means you're not a good match. The myth is genius. As long as you believe it's all about feelings, you will never look at the economics of your relationship. Layer 3, the price of exit. Let's go back to Elizabeth. At some point she started to rebel. She fled Vienna for months, exhausted herself with extreme diets and 6-hour daily workouts. Do you know how historians describe this for decades? As eccentricity and nervous breakdowns. Almost no one stated the obvious. Her body was the only space of control she had left. She couldn't control the empire or her children, but she could control what she weighed. And this is what the myth does today. It turns resistance into pathology. A woman who submits is an ideal wife. A woman who rebels is hysterical or toxic. You aren't breaking the law, you're breaking the fairy tale. Layer 4, the deepest one, internalization. You don't need a guard at the door if the prisoner believes there is nothing but a void outside. Romance teaches us you are my other half. Without a partner, you are incomplete. It sounds like poetry, but in practice, a person who truly believes they are only a half never leaves. Not because they are held by force, but because they literally don't know how to exist alone. The most effective subjugation is the kind that feels like love. Let's fast forward to our time. Seoul, 2022. A young woman runs a popular blog about the soft life. The aesthetic is perfect. Morning matcha lattes, linen sheets, and a husband who handles everything so she doesn't have to stress. In the comments, thousands of girls write, "Dream life. Where can I find a man like this?" A year and a half later, she publishes a long post. She left him. It turns out she had no access to the joint bank account. Her husband decided when she was allowed to see her friends. She hadn't worked in 3 years, and now she has a massive gap in her resume. The apartment, the car, even her phone, everything was in his name. And you know how the comments divided? Half said, "Thank God you escaped." But the other half? They said, "What did you expect? He was paying for everything. You chose this beautiful life." The language is different. The century is different. The technology is different. But the architecture is exactly the same. Control through resources, isolation, and a romantic justification. And society's reaction is the same. As long as the picture is pretty, nobody asks what's behind it. And when the picture tears, society blames the one who tore it. Now, I want you to understand me correctly. The problem was never the romance itself. The desire to love, to be near someone, to care, to build a life together. That is probably the best thing we are capable of as human beings. The problem is that romance was turned into an alibi for inequality, which, without the pretty wrapping paper, would look exactly like what it is: extraction. The extraction of your time, your body, your labor, and your right to make decisions. We are used to thinking of power as something brutal, a shouted order, a fist on the table. But the most terrifying, most resilient power is the kind you don't even recognize, the kind you mistake for tenderness, the kind you sing songs about and dream of. Elizabeth of Bavaria felt the bars of her cage, but she didn't have the vocabulary to name her pain. The whole world told her she had won the lottery. She was an empress. Monshi was cared for. When the only language available describes your cage as a palace, any resistance looks like ingratitude. Maybe some of you watching this right now are in a relationship where everything looks like a movie on the outside, but inside you can barely breathe. The hardest part isn't leaving the system. The hardest part is seeing that you're in it, especially when the bars are covered in roses and everyone around you keeps saying, "Look how lucky you are." There is a beautiful word in the German language, Sehnsucht. It means a deep yearning for something that perhaps never even existed. It's not nostalgia. Nostalgia has a specific address in the past. Sehnsucht is a longing without coordinates, a homesickness for a place you've never been. Elizabeth spent the last 20 years of her life in constant motion, like Corfu, Madeira, England. She almost never returned to Vienna. She was searching for a place where she could just be, not a wife, not an empress, not a beautiful symbol, just be. She never found it. In 1898, she was assassinated by an anarchist on a promenade in Geneva. He didn't even know exactly who he was killing. He just needed someone important. Maybe the most honest question you can ask yourself about your own love story isn't, "How do I feel about him?" It's this: who am I allowed to be while I am in this? Not what they call you, not what role you play for your partner, but who you are allowed to be. How can you be weak? Can you be independent? Can you make choices? Because love, where you are not allowed to be yourself, is not love. It's power, no matter how beautiful it looks on a postcard.